All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm so excited about today's guest. Her name is Melissa Brown. We've known each other since high school, and she is a sleep consultant. She's developed a sleep training approach through her company, Sleep Shop, which is tailored to each individual's family's unique goals and parenting style. Having worked with hundreds of families, both locally and internationally, Melissa has become a go-to resource for new parents and seasoned veterans alike. Whether helping a family welcome a newborn, like baby Tosh, or implementing a sleep schedule tune-up for a toddler, like my crazy man, Sebastian, Melissa is always there. As a mother of multiples, beautiful children, by the way, you have to stalk her Instagram. She is particularly ready to ensure sanity for parents who are welcoming multiples themselves. Melissa probably wouldn't tell you herself, but she's worked with multiple celebrity clients, including Jamie Lee Sigler, Alex Morgan, Kim Caldwell, and Morgan and Bodie Miller. Melissa! Hey, girlfriend! Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is so fun. I love getting to do this.
I know, me too. And I also, I owe you my sanity multiple times over. I feel like when we got together right before Sebastian was born, and you sent me like the sleep schedule, and then we talked literally like every couple of months, every time something would come up. I'm like, you're the only person that keeps me sane and texts me back at 4:30 in the morning. So thank you for that.
Of course. I'm more than happy to.
So can you tell everybody what a sleep consultant is and how you started?
Yeah. So it's my background's a little different with it. So I started actually originally working as a chaplain in a hospital. So was doing a lot of family and bereavement care, but essentially the heart of it was working with different families through major transitions and obviously some unfortunate, loss and all that. But I was always drawn to like kind of the family dynamic and just, working with those people in those different transitions or whatever they may be. So I did that for a while. And then, so I have my master's in counseling and I love that. And obviously we started to grow our family, it was a really hard place to be with little ones. It was I didn't have the emotional capacity to kind of see that much and do that and try to be a new mom and all that alike. So I kind of started doing it by accident. I was like, someone had recommended a book. I read it. I did it. Then I started kind of creating these schedules and I'd give them to all my friends and their babies would sleep through the night. And then I'd give it to someone else and their babies would sleep through. And then I would end up talking to complete strangers at like 7:30 at night, like for an hour on the phone, telling them these tricks and stuff. And my husband was like, why are you not doing this as a business? Like you were spending so much time. But I truly loved it. And I loved it. I kind of went into sleep. I have since learned how restorative and healing sleep is. But I really did it because we're kind of, as new parents, you kind of, you want to welcome this baby into your world, but you also want to make sure that you are still feeding your self-care and relate in your marriage and your relationships, and totally, being able to do the things that you love while enjoying your new baby. So I kind of did that to kind of give myself a routine that was sustainable. Sleep came out of it. And then, I kind of threw it out there and started the business, and the amount of people and friends and family that told people about me and got to work with, it just grew from there. And it was a complete gift. And we were going through infertility at the time. I was like continuing to miscarry. And so it was like a new focus. It was my new baby. And I honestly had no idea that this tiny little hobby would become what it became.
It's amazing to watch. I feel like there isn't a girl we went to high school with or a mom that we went to high school with that hasn't used Sleep Shop OC. And they're like, well, what did Melissa say? Because it's one thing to follow someone online or like get a schedule from a website or a blog, but it's a completely different experience when I can jump on the phone with you and you can give like tailored advice for me, because I feel like it focuses you. There were so many times where I just go down a rabbit hole looking at all the blogs or, reading as much as I could and then stressing out or feeling like there was too many things to implement. So you always have like done such a great job of making it really strategic. And I really so appreciate that from you. Aww. So let's get into it. You started as a chaplain and moved into building this business. Uh-huh. How does it normally work? And when should someone start with a sleep consultant?
So kind of the difference, like you said it a little bit there, is that there's so many resources out there, right? And probably similar to nutrition, there's so many resources, but the love of working one-on-one someone is really what I love to do, because I believe each family is different. Each baby is certainly different. So when someone comes to work with us, they I'm getting on the phone with them or connecting them with one of the consultants that works with me. And what we do is we literally go through a questionnaire that's very detailed. I want to know, Kelly, with you, I want to know your parenting style. I want to know your routines. Do you like to get up early and work out before your baby's up for the day? What is your comfort level at different things? Where is your baby at? Kind of getting to know truly the family that this baby is born into and what works for them. Then from that questionnaire, we create a customized sleep plan. And so that is age appropriate. It's developmentally appropriate. Sleep training gets the worst rap of like, just let your baby cry and they'll figure it out. That's not how we work at all. We work to really meet the baby's needs before they need them. So feed them before they get hungry, put them down before they get overtired. And then with that, we offer unlimited support walking them through. So just like you said, anyone can text me whenever any of my clients are allowed to text me as much as they need. Hopping on the phone with them, I'm texting them back, telling them what to do. I'm reassuring that what they're doing is right, or we troubleshoot together and change it. Or I'm just they already know what to do and they just need me to say like, yes, do it. Like kind of like with you, Kelly, if I ever had to text you, can I drink this? Is that okay? But even though I know it is or isn't, I just need you, the expert, to tell me that, and I'll agree to it and follow through with it, So we love working one-on-one, and then over time and a lot too, I was just telling someone the other day, like, thankful for you pushed me to do those classes and to do that. And they've been incredible. And so that's a different avenue for people, maybe with different budget levels, that to get on the class. I'm doing live Zoom calls with them. I'm answering their questions, but a lot of them actually still end up doing the one-on-one, because I think there's something, I love the one-on-one because I become so close and like friends with my clients. I love them so much, but I really do think everyone responds to a tailored fit approach. And I try to offer that for all my clients.
Definitely. So would you say, like, when we first get started with a newborn, would you start with someone before they had their baby or in the first couple of days, or what do you think is the most successful?
Oh, that's a great question. I kind of went on a tangent there. So yes, the babies that we work with from day one do incredible, because with learning independent sleep and it's basically we're starting a sustainable routine and rhythm with your baby. So there's nothing aggressive about it. It's age appropriate. So when you come home from the hospital and you start to get on the schedule, it's truly meeting all their needs. So you can start with it right away. Those babies tend to have the most success because they don't learn any bad habits. And when they don't learn any bad habits, you don't have to do cry it out or behavior modification. As a baby gets older, and toddlers, as we know, can fight different things, and there are protesting that happens. But when they're really little, if you do it from the get-go, you're going to have great success by 3 months. And I tell people that by 3 months, you're kind of dialed in. But a lot of people, again, if they're not ready to start, then I always say start when you're ready, because, post those first couple months after having a newborn look very different for everyone, and some people love the support and need it. Other people are like, I'm just going to hold my baby for 3 months and I'll call you when I'm ready and I'm going to enjoy this. And that's fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like with Sebastian, I don't know if you remember, but I was like, yeah, I want to be on a schedule. And he was at the NICU. So he came home on a schedule.
Totally.
And then I think as a first-time mom, you're a bit of a pushover and you're a little more sensitive to everything. And, I feel like I just fell into all the bad habits. So I'm going to want you to talk about what the most common bad habits are and like how to avoid those. But I feel like now with Tashin, putting him down awake, swaddled, kind of sleepy. He's like, see you later, Mom, I'm good. And it's so easy. And I'm like, wait, my schedule is predictable. And he's, only 10 weeks old right now, which is he's still getting up in the middle of the night, which is funny because I remember you had Sebastian sleeping through, it was like 8 hours at 8 weeks and 9 hours at 9 weeks and 10 hours at 10 weeks. And I was like, how is this possible? We went away for New Year's with a group of friends when you could actually hang out with your friends.
Yeah.
Back when Sebastian was, it was New Year's, like right after he was born. And I remember we went with 4 newborn babies and he was the only one. And we were like, hey guys, like having our coffee in the morning. And they were like wanting to kill us, but it's just, it is, I'm hopeful by 3 months with Tashin that he's all the way through the night. But last night was awesome. Like we put him down at 7 and he woke up at 3. So a little bit before that, like normal, whatever it's scheduled for. But we passy popped him till about like a couple times till that 3. And then we're like, okay, he's upset now. He wants to eat something. And we were good.
Absolutely.
He slept till 7. So I'm like, okay,
That's
there we
amazing.
go. Yeah.
Totally.
So let's get to the bad. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, even then, I think your perspective is so great to recognize, like talking about how babies are different, like Sebastian and how he did, and that just worked for him. And having to eat at 3 or 4 is totally normal for a 10-week-old, but he responded great. He took that full feed and then went back down for the whole night, or until morning. So it's a great way to look at it. And you are this close. And obviously we can talk about that finally, dropping that feed, but he's like so ahead of the game at 10 weeks now anyways, that, that's a perfect example of how every baby is a little different.
Yeah, no, it's crazy because I look back and I remember how dialed in Bash's sleep was because we were like on the phone with you all the time being like, okay, what are we doing? And I remember being on speakerphone in our LA apartment with Chris and he was like feverishly writing down all the notes and like being the best student ever. And I was like, I'll just text her again if I forget. But then the 4-month regression hit with Bash and I did all the wrong things. So let's get into the bad habits.
Okay.
And kind of mess up sleep for baby.
Okay. Yeah. And everyone, this is a very common thing every time I get on a call. I know this is wrong, or I know I'm doing this bad. And I always tell people like, no, not at all. Like you just figure out what's working and what doesn't work. So for example, I think one of the most common things that I see is we put the baby to sleep and we feed them to sleep. And so that is something they are never going to be like, you know what, Mom, you sure look tired. Don't worry about feeding me to sleep today. I'm just going to put myself back down to sleep. You go back to bed and I'm good. Or, Mom, you don't need to rock me anymore. I'm just going to lay down, because they're never going to do that because they prefer to be put to sleep. So our whole goal is teaching a baby to put themselves to sleep. So like you said, putting them drowsy but awake down, they can look around their crib and know, hey, it's time to go to sleep. So again, if people prefer, and again, sometimes a baby is going to be rocked to sleep or held to sleep. That's just how it is. And that's okay. And sometimes they're going to be fed to sleep because feeding is a form of exercise for them and it's soothing. And sometimes they just can't make it through the whole feed without dozing off or wanting to go to sleep. And again, that's normal. I think having the mindset where we are thinking we're teaching them to go down to sleep, not doing it for them. So we're helping them, not doing it for them. And so that's something. So for example, one of the biggest things I see is that the 4-month sleep progression, one of the baby's been sleeping all night. They start getting up at like 4. So you pick them up real quickly, rock them real fast. They go back to sleep. You're like, oh, good. And then you put them back down. then they're up at 5:15. And what you're seeing is that they're getting up at every sleep cycle and they're like, wait a second, that time when mom came in and rocked me, that's the good. That's what I want. And a 4-month-old can make those associations. They're not manipulative. They're not trying. They just think, oh, if that's being offered, I will gladly take it. Like a milkshake at 3 a.m., sign me up. I will take it. Even if I'm not hungry, I'll suck that baby down. So again, everything we encourage is meeting their needs. So never do any of if your baby's hungry, feed your baby. If your baby's in pain and needs to be picked up and held, do all of those things. But what we tend to do is get into these habits that we start putting their baby to sleep. We start doing it for them. And then they don't know that independent sleep. And so when they go through light sleep cycles and transition to that REM cycle, when there's a change in any sort of environment or I don't know, any regression, any milestone, any of that, we've created these bad habits to be like, oh, we'll do it for you. You don't need to do it yourself. And they're never just going to try to do it themselves without giving the opportunity to do so.
So other than not putting our baby down awake or feeding our baby to sleep, are there any other bad habits or things that can get in the way of really good sleep for babies?
Absolutely. So one of probably the most common thing I see with babies is overtired and overstimulation. I think we underestimate their little brains and how much they are taking in at all times. So a lot of times what we do is there's this, and I hear this all the time, like keep your baby up all day and they'll sleep better at night. And that is the complete opposite. Sleep begets sleep. The better daytime sleep and more restorative sleep they're having during the day, the better they are going to transition in and out of sleep cycles at night. So one of the problems is we keep babies up too long. So if you're, I'll talk to someone, I had a phone call with someone yesterday and they're like, I'm following his sleep cues. His eyebrows are red, he's yawning. And then we start the nap routine. And what I would say is we should have started that nap routine like 10 to 15 minutes earlier. So you want to set them up for success. So put them in their crib before they're overtired and showing really overtired signs. And that's a really big deal. So I think being overtired. Another thing is making sure they have full meals. So babies are notoriously lazy eaters. They want to have a little snack and take a cat nap, and then a little bit of a snack and then a cat nap. And what happens is their feeds aren't spread out enough for them to actually eat a full meal. So they're not hungry enough to eat, a full meal. They eat a snack, but then they fall asleep because they're tired, but then they actually can't have a full nap because they still are a little bit hungry. So they naturally want to get in those patterns. And I think if you just let them snack and cat nap, they're not going to change that behavior until you start spreading out the feeds a little bit, or maybe trying to extend their nap time or nighttime sleep.
I love it. It's like very Fab Four of you to be like not a snacker for kids. We don't snack. Full meals only. I don't care if you need to have 4, 5, 6.
I love it.
Meals only. Let's get that blood sugar regulated and your sleep regulated at the same time.
Totally. I actually, Kelly, think of you so much with some of this stuff because with the, not to bore everyone with like the sleep, but like REM sleep and certain stages of sleep are so restorative and the renewal, and they impact your immunity, they impact your hormones. And I remember you always telling me that of how much for us as like, when you were getting me adjusted after like the crazy hormones of having twins and how those all impact it. It is really crazy because it's the same for babies. They are impacted by the sort of quality of sleep they are or are not getting.
I love science and I love for you to get nerdy with everyone. So can you talk me through like what it looks like after a baby has a feed? Or maybe we'll go through a schedule of like what should happen when a baby is awake. And then when they do go to sleep, what do the sleep cycles look like?
Okay, that's great. So we kind of want to associate when they're super well rested, they're going to eat better. So if they eat better, they're going to eat a full meal. Again, you don't want them feeding to sleep. You want them feeding, then playing, and then sleep. So it's something we've heard a million times. There's kind of an eat, play, sleep cycle, separating the feeding from the sleeping. So with a baby, you're wanting them to get a full meal. I do recommend, depending on milk supply, if you're exclusively breastfeeding, just try to get them to eat on both sides. You want them getting that hind milk. You want them getting that fatty milk that's going to keep them fuller for longer, So and if they're well rested, they're more likely to eat a full feed. So you're looking at a full feed. Then you're looking at some sort of playtime. Depending on the baby's age, that playtime, a newborn, that playtime is very short. It's basically enough to maybe sing to your baby, talk to him, take him outside, get that vitamin D, get your baby in the sunlight. That's so important. That helps regulate that circadian rhythm and all of those things. So, a little bit of playtime when they're older, their playtime's a little longer and you can do more with them. And then you kind of wind down to get to sleep. So essentially for, let's just say a baby 12 months and under, they are sleeping in between each meal, so they need some sort of sleep. Sometimes that sleep is an hour and a half, 2 hours. Sometimes it's 45 minutes and that's okay. But the long-term goal is getting your baby to do 2 sleep cycles, which we know sleep cycles are 30 to 45 minutes. They begin in a non-REM sleep. Babies tend to very easily fall asleep in that cycle. When they transition to REM sleep, and which I talked about, the REM sleep is the filter sleep. It's the restorative sleep. It is so important for them to learn to connect that sleep cycle from non-REM to REM, because we want babies and us alike, we need that REM sleep. It's as they're learning all these things, it's a lighter sleep, but it filters through all this brand new information and all these new physical milestones these babies are hitting. So back to the eat, play, sleep cycles. You're kind of doing that throughout the day. And then, in terms of the nighttime sleep, you are kind of winding down before bed. I believe really, really, it's really important to have a consistent bedtime routine. It should be filled with tons of snuggles and songs and books and engagement. It's one of the best times to connect with your baby. And like, with Bash now, and I have, my oldest is 11, we still have a bedtime routine that's similar to when they were babies, of kind of ending the day with that connection, that love, but also trying at best to get them down to sleep, to put themselves into those sleep cycles easily, not pass out from exhaustion, because there's a huge difference with us and babies alike versus putting ourselves to sleep nicely or falling asleep and passing out of exhaustion.
That's so important for everyone to hear, because it works for adults too. A poor night's sleep affects all of our hormones. It makes us hungrier, more irritable. We're not as sensitive to the hormones coming into our brain that tell us that we're full and we're calm. It's a complete thing that I see in adults, and you can see it in your kids too. I love that you mentioned the bedtime routine, because I do think with Sebastian, with your first child, you're like, oh, I want to snuggle, and we just have a show on, and we're like, and then he's sort of falling asleep, and then I'm putting him to bed, and it's not as consistent. One thing I will say is with Toshin, because we have such an awesome bedtime routine with Sebastian, we have a great bedtime routine with Toshin right away. And the 2 nights that he slept through till 3, we have done the bath. We've done the body massage. We've sang the songs. We've read the books. We swaddled. We did a little rocking. We put him down awake. It was like, oh yeah, if I do the work, he does the work.
No, totally. And that is, the thing about the bath is super important, because temperature is huge in sleep. And we cycle through, and babies don't know how to control their temperature as well as we do. They don't know how to regulate it. And even for adults, and any sort of sleep hygiene from baby to adult, the temperature of the baby is, or the room temperature and how hot or cold they are, will impact sleep dramatically. So I know a lot of pediatricians. So again, I always tell everyone, talk to your doctor, because if babies have really bad skin sensitivities, you don't want to over dry them by bathing them too much. But a bath before bed or a shower before us helps us regulate our temperature, and we all tend to sleep better. So that's a big deal. It's also a cue to the baby to kind of start getting into that mode. Okay, let's start producing some melatonin. Oh, I'm getting all the good feels from the baby massage. I'm having those connection. My stress levels are not, their cortisol is not rising. They're feeling good. They're feeling connected. And we can't underestimate how big that is. So I love that you say that with Toshin, how he does respond to that, because it's really important, for them to really feel safe and secure in knowing what's coming next. But you're also setting him up for complete success by making his sleep hygiene, let's say, the best possible case scenario.
Oh, it's been a game changer. And you just mentioned something that I think it was a major fear for me as a new mom, especially being in our apartment in LA and now being at renting my in-laws house now, is the temperature. I feel like, especially because the monitor is always telling you what the temperature of your child's room is. And I was so fearful with Sebastian that he was freezing all the time. I was like, he's cold. He's cold. He's freezing. Like he's in this onesie. We can't really, old LA apartment, can't really regulate the heat. You kick the heat on, then kick it off, then kick it on, then kick it off. I wanted it to be like 74 degrees in his room, and everything you read online is like 64 degrees now. So where should we be aiming to have their temperature in their room? And like, what are some ways that we can set up their room for success?
Okay, those are great questions. So temperature is kind of hard because we have our thermostat, right? Then we have our baby monitor. Then we are basically told of the temperature of the room in so many different ways. And it's like Murphy's Law that like the baby's room is either the warmest in the house or the coldest in the house, so it's really hard to regulate. But if you're going to go for temperature, somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees. And honestly, most likely it's usually cooler than you think. And so ideal temperature of the room is 68 to 72 degrees. So you're either going to see that again on your thermostat or your baby monitor. However, remember that might not be totally accurate. So to manage your baby's temperature, you need to feel your baby. So if their back of their neck is wet or warm, if their head's sweaty, when they kind of feel clammy a little bit, they're probably too warm. And remember, especially 10 weeks, you're not regulating your body temperature correctly. Yet they don't know how to do it. Their brain can't do that. So I would say that they're probably too warm. So you can either dress them a little bit more lightly. You can make the room a little bit more cool, whatever you need to. However, if you're going in there and their nose is icy or their hands are icy, they're probably too cold. And sometimes, babies tend to have really big, I don't want to say sleep regressions. They have like a really hard time sleeping when it starts to get cold and heater goes on and off, because the heater can be kind of stifling for them and it's hot and too much, or during super hot months where the air goes on and then it gets too cold in the room. Yeah. So you just want to make sure that if they are too cold that you dress them a little like warmer and try to do that, or regulate the room temperature. Some people, if it's safe, they can put floor heaters in there or do something, to kind of manage that, but temperature will impact him. And my suggestion for someone like you, Kelly, or someone in a big house is kind of really go in the room and see how he is in there and see, check Toshin, check Bashes. Are they too cold or too hot? And then adjust in terms of pajamas and sleepwear. I love the sleep sack that is made with the material, the merino wool, that does help regulate temperature. It keeps babies cooler when it's hot out and warmer when it's cool out. And I don't know a ton about all that. I just know that there are certain fabrics that are better for temperature control. So I suggest, if you're going to kind of splurge with your kids, instead of they all have the adorable outfits, splurge in sleepwear or sleep sacks and swaddles. It makes a huge difference.
Okay, cool. Well, speaking on that, I want you to continue to tell us like how to set up the room for sure outside of like temperature, but we'll go through your favorite products after that.
Oh,
that's
okay. Yeah, I know. I was like, I keep kind of almost being like, oh, and this, but I'm like, this
no, good. I love it. Rabbit holes. We can squirrel all over the place here.
Sorry.
I'll bring you back. I'm like writing notes. I'm like, they're going to want to know this. Okay, go for it.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay. So back to ideal temperature. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure the room is pitch black and dark. So this is something that everyone gets questions like, oh, I'm told to have them nap all day in the light so then that they sleep at bedtime. And that's not the case. I think you make that sleep environment. I always say you want it to be like Vegas. You want a Vegas hotel room. Back in the day when we would go to Vegas, it's pitch black and it's cooler in there and we all sleep better. So you want that room pitch black, invest in the blackout shades. There's so many different options, which again, we can go over, but you want to make the room dark, especially, for us here in California, the time changes all the time. And so that will impact, the second a baby sees light come into the room in the morning, that signals to their brain, oh, it's time to get up. Oh, you don't need to produce any more melatonin. Oh, we're ready to go for the day. So the dark room helps the baby getting in there at nighttime, because sometimes during the summer, it's still light at night, but it's 7:00 and the baby needs to sleep. So you just want it dark. Also, I'm a huge fan of a sound machine. So sound machines not only help get the brain into deeper sleep cycles, and with the sound machine, you need to do something consistent. So you're looking at doing a rain or white noise or brown noise, something like that. So it helps them get into deeper sleep cycles. And it also helps block out outside noise. So just like the dog barking, the Amazon delivery, a toddler running through the house screaming. You don't want to live in that angst that everyone has to be perfectly quiet. That's not realistic. And, you know, a lot of my clients in New York that live in these big apartments, like there's no way, it's loud outside. There's honking and this and all that. So a sound machine helps block out outside noise. Also, I think the sleep environment needs to be safe. I love some of the stuff you love that we can talk to at the end of that for the crib. And it's awesome. So I just think safe sleep environment, make sure it's not too hot or too cold. It's super dark, and use a sound machine. And that sleep environment can be put wherever you are. If you're at grandma's house, if you're in a hotel room, if you're staying at friend's house, you can emulate that sleep environment wherever you go. And that will help your little ones sleep no matter where they're sleeping.
Awesome. Well, let's get into some of your favorite products to make this happen then.
Okay. So I will say this, and this is not for babies. This is for adults. Hands down, my favorite product is Chili Sleep. It's the best sleep product for an adult that I've ever found. And then back to the temperature, it regulates temperature under your sheet all night long. And I work with them. It's actually the only company, Kelly, that I reached out to. And I was like, how do I sell your stuff? This thing is amazing because this is the best. And I can have codes or whatever for it if anyone wants it for a discount, because it is not cheap.
I met the owners of Chili Pad. Yes, they're amazing.
Do you have one?
I don't have one yet, but should I get one? I need to get one.
Kelly,
I know.
Call them right now and get it. It is hands down the best product. I've actually thought of you too, of course, with all of it, because she is a science person. Like they know everything about the science of sleep, and I'm fascinated by it, but it does work. So I always tell people, and I've had so many clients purchase it now because they're like, okay, I got my baby to sleep. Is this really worth it? And I'm like, yes, it is. It is totally worth it. So that is the best sleep product. The other one is, and I love the Woolino sleep sack. I think that's the one made with merino wool. And I just think it really does make a difference. A sound machine, you can use anything. The one I love is it's on Spa Homedics, and it's on Amazon for $20, and it has batteries. So if you're, in a hotel room and one baby's in a pack and play out one side of the room, the other one's in the weird closet, you can, you don't have to have it plugged in. You can use batteries, and they're portable, and you can take them wherever. So it's a Spa Homedics one. And gosh, you're in the baby world now. I'm old with the baby products, but I kind of love some of the simplest things. I still think Kiki Pants is one of the best pajamas for babies, not only because they're cute, but that bamboo, it also is temperature control, and it helps.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm really excited about the Spa Homedics because we put Bash in the closet in Mammoth every time we go up there. And Chris has got this super long orange extension cord that's for a construction site, trying to get it under the door every time. And he's cussing in the corner, and I'm like, it's okay, babe. But that's so good to know. Okay, cool. Well, we'll link your favorite things to the podcast for sure, so that people can find these. I'll put some of my favorites on there too.
Yeah.
We have the Woolina sleep sack from Sebastian. We also have the Ollie wrap. That's really helpful for Houdinis.
I forgot to say that the Ollie wrap is my favorite swaddle for sure.
Because you're hey, you're Velcroed into this straitjacket now. Yeah, you're fine. And I have a question too, because I feel like Toshin, I noticed right away when he came out, well, all of his ultrasound pictures, his hands were by his mouth and his face. And then when I first started putting him in the Ollie, Bash used to love it. I'd put Bash in the Ollie, and it was he'd get a weird little kid grin, an infant grin. And I'm like, does he just love this right now? This is amazing. Toshin, I felt like I was literally putting him in a straitjacket. And he was like, Mom, what is this?
Totally.
So I tried to put him in the one with the arms up, the swaddle with the arms up. But then it was weird. He was trying to put cotton covered hands over his face, and he looked a little out of control. So I just went back to the Ollie, even though I'm you don't really seem like you like it. But now it's totally a cue. We put him in it. He's totally fine with it. He loves it. And it's not a fight like it was right in the beginning,
Totally. And that's actually, you said it perfectly. It's a sleep cue. Just so when they start with it goes from a swaddle, and then they go to a sleep sack. Those are sleep cues. But they say that babies that fight the swaddle the most usually need it the most. So in utero and your belly, he probably does, and he'll probably be a sleeper with his hands close to his face as he gets older. But his moral reflex, he hasn't grown out of it yet. So he's going to startle himself, wake himself up more, not swaddled than swaddled. So I think they kind of adjust to it. They get a sleep cue, but just because they fight it doesn't mean they don't need it. If anything, the babies that fight it the most probably need the swaddle the most.
So good to know.
It is. They feel mean. I have people be like, they hate the swaddle. They hate the swaddle. And that's always, I'm like, they do, but they probably need it. The only time you're not swaddling a super newborn is if they're rolling, which some of these babies can roll very early. It is so crazy. But when they're that little, and like if Tashin was rolling, I would be like, oh yeah, get out of the sleep sack. But just because he seems to not like, get out of the swaddle. But just because he seems to not like it, I would still keep him in there and clearly he's doing amazing. So when they grow out of it, when they grow out of the moral reflex and the swaddle, it's usually a good transition, because it's also when their brain starts to be able to be like, oh, I can self-soothe, meaning they don't, before a baby can put their hand in their mouth or they can suck on their hands, that's actually more by accident, and they know they like it. It feels good. So they do it. But as they get a little older, much like I would say, between 14 and 20 weeks, they can actually make the connection like, oh, that sucking on my hand is, I'm choosing to do that. And I like how it feels, so it's a good time to then transition out of it and move to a sleep sack.
Okay, so sleep sack transition happens between 14 and 20 weeks.
Yes, or if they're rolling, you have to do it. That's like I'm such a stickler. Even if they roll one time, they should not be swaddled if they are able to roll.
Okay, good to know. So let's go into extending sleep length and like really pushing it so that people can start dropping feeds. And do you remember that one time? So Tashin, I think we had started sleep training a little bit. So I think he was it was like right after the 4-month regression, and I was having a mommy meltdown and called you from Mammoth, because my kids don't sleep when they go to high altitude. It's just a thing. But I called you and I was so shook up because I had found myself down a study rabbit hole about trauma that I was causing my son. And obviously I was super sensitive after Bash not being able to have skin to skin and being taken in the ambulance to CHLA. I was so worried about his ability to connect as a human and his ability to feel love and supported. And then, then I'm doing sleep training and I'm down this rabbit hole of the trauma that I'm going to cause my child for having him cry for 5 minutes. You had to sort of walk me off a ledge. Can you talk about that study that people reference and what it's based on?
Yeah. So I wanted to say, Cal, what you went through with Bash too is it's amazing. You can recognize it. And that's part of the story, right? All of us as mom, no mom wants to hear their baby cry. No mom who loves this child is yeah, you can just get in there at 4 months and cry and I'm good. No one naturally feels that way. So I love that you normalize that feeling of oh, I'm causing trauma. I don't know though, when we ever do stop not wondering how we're messing our kids up. Someone knows that one. Can they please tell me? But when you ever feel like you're doing it right, I don't know, but it's a very common at that age. I also, and you can attest to this, around 4 months, there's a super huge swing in hormones for moms, so just to give kind of a background of where you're at 4 months, things start to change a little bit. That's when you start losing all your hair. And there's a lot going on at 4 months. And you've also, if your baby's been not sleeping, you're also really sleep deprived by 4 months old. It's a long time to go without sleep. So with that said, the studies done that the cortisol levels are so high that they cause so much stress. There is a part of a parent that feels like they're causing long-term trauma, that this baby's going to remember this sort of rejection, or laying in their crib, waking up one day feeling oh my gosh, I'll never recover. I'll never bond with my parent. They're abandoning me. And what I say to that is, one, as moms, those are normal feelings. That's normal, but let's talk through that. That study done on some of those cortisol levels was done to foster kids. It was done to people that actually were truly abandoned and did not have that connection and not have that physical touch. And read any part of that, or read about some of the orphans in certain places like Romania that are not held for weeks at a time or given about. Your heart would shatter into 1 billion pieces thinking about these poor babies. So and that's not where all the studies done, but it was done on trauma babies that had been through some sort of trauma or abandonment. Because think of it, someone who had taught me about this originally had told me, like, think of it, what parent, if they don't know if it causes trauma, is going to subject their 4-month-old to a study to see if it's fine. Do you know what I mean? Like there were different circumstances surrounding some of that. And there's been some done since. I was told by a very well-respected pediatrician about, when I want to know about the cortisol levels. The cortisol levels do rise during stress moments for babies and or crying. All of that. And she had told me that the cortisol levels are higher in a sleep-deprived baby over time than that initial time where they're crying 5 or 10 minutes. That over long periods of times of being overstimulated, of being sleep-deprived, of missing those REM cycles, of kind of being in a constant state of angst because you're too tired, your cortisol levels are higher there. And I don't say that as an argument. I'm more to say that as like, so we understand, saying a blanketed statement that cortisol levels are stress and it's going to cause trauma. We just need to kind of understand the full thing, that cortisol levels also are normal and they happen, but long-term, they're going to be much higher and more significant for sleep deprivation than they will be for a couple nights of crying. Right. So with that said, back to the crying, which is the number one thing is, like, I'll just go with you for that's a perfect example, is Bash's needs were met. He was never, for 4 months, he was on a routine. He was being fed full meals. He was being offered sleep in between each of those meals. He was cared for. He was loved. He was engaged with. You had met all of his needs. And so protest was very different from him saying, I need something and my mom's abandoned me, and you feeling that trauma. So again, the background and, my background's in counseling. I would never tell someone to do anything that in any way, shape, or form compromised the bonding or attachment with their baby, because that is so important and it's so significant. And along that same vein is, as moms, a lot of these babies are lucky enough to have a parent that is another parent that is extremely involved. They have grandparents. They have some of the most loved babies I've seen have nannies that love them dearly. And I think sometimes we need to recognize we are not, as moms, we are there to give them that love, but we take that on as that they will only hate us and they will think we abandoned them and traumatized them. And we forget all these people around that, the village mentality, that are there to love and take care of our babies. So I just recommend, if you're not comfortable, don't do it. If you're in a place of with certain postpartum or other things, don't exacerbate your own anxiety, but talk to someone about it and recognize what is the most important thing right now. And a lot of times when all those needs are met, Kelly, they actually are more negatively impacted by the sleep deprivation than they are by mom being like, hey, bud, I'm going to give you 5 minutes and see how you do.
Yeah, I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, but one of the things that I always fall back on and lean on is the science. And one of the studies that really stood out to me was actually from Canada. And this is 2008 millennial cohort study, and it investigated the relationship between sleep and brain development in children. And they found that irregular bedtimes between the ages of 0 and 3 actually negatively affected reading skills, math skills, spatial awareness, and that less than 10 hours a night for the age of 3 were more likely to develop language and reading problems and ADHD as they grew older. And then followed over time, this lag developmentally even showed up to the age of 7 and in girls more than boys. But still, what I think is so I take a deep breath. You can hear me, because you don't want your kid to cry, but I know how important REM sleep is. I know that it helps brain development, and that strong relationship between sleep and neuroplasticity, both structurally and functionally, is so important for our children and their ability to learn. And, I think back to okay, we bit the bullet. We pushed Bash's little sleep hours, and we got him, 6 weeks, 6 hours. And that he was like a dream kid in the beginning, but then we had to re-sleep train him again and again. But I have to keep reminding myself of that, because I see him now and he's so verbal, and he is, I just feel like he's had just massive brain growth and expansion. And the kids' brains are just growing and developing so many connections before the age of 5. It's such an important period of time. And I love that you say that, because I see that with clients, cortisol levels elevated over time when they're, they're pushing themselves so hard and they're sleep deprived and they're in the grind mode. And then, you know, they have adrenal fatigue and then it takes us months of like calming their body to like bring their numbers back into balance. And so we're continually finding these types of studies really, they help me take a deep breath and remember like the science part of my brain. Like this is harder for me to do, but my son is, you know, and if someone has a daughter, is going to benefit more long-term from this type of behavior and setting those standards and not being wish-washy. Because I think with Sebastian, I was so wish-washy. We trained him, he was good. And then we got to 4 months and I'm like, something's wrong. I have to save him, you know, and then I saved him a couple of times and one wake up turned into 2 wake ups. And then at like, you know, 5 months, I'm like, how did a month go by? And now I'm still waking up with him 2 times a night and he's 5 months old. This is ridiculous. And then I have to go back and train him again. And I think that's something I'm refusing to do with Tashin is be wish-washy because they need to know what the plan is. And I feel like they feel safer and they like do it better with the plan. But let's get into what the plan is and how do we push these bedtimes and these elongate them and get our babies sleeping through the night.
Yeah. So that is kind of, I guess, the question, right? Everyone wants to know so this is great. How do we do it? So it's got a couple things to kind of like, if you're just listening to this, that you can start to do is have a set wake up and bedtime every day. It's really important to kind of start the day as you want to move forward. Sometimes it's tempting to let your baby, if they had a feed at like, let's say 5:30, 6 a.m. and let them sleep till 9, but you want to set their circadian rhythm. And that starts with the morning. So start with the morning, get them in the sunshine, open the blinds, do that. Throughout the day, you want to be, again, depending on age, you want to make sure they're eating full feeds. That is huge. No baby can sleep through the night if they're hungry. So the only way to ensure that they're hungry is that every time that they're eating, offer them a full meal. The size of that meal will change based on the size of the baby and the age. But as they get older, you know, the AAP says babies need 24 to 32 ounces in a 24-hour period. So those meals are only 2 or 3 ounces. They're absolutely going to have to eat at night to make up for those calories. However, as they get older and their meals get bigger, you can reallocate those nighttime calories to bigger meals during the day. So you want to look at doing a full meal every time that they eat. Another thing is watching their wake windows. That's really important. We talked about the overstimulation. Some of the hardest babies to get to sleep are overstimulated. And so if they're overtired and overstimulated, they don't go to sleep as well. So you want to make sure you check their wake windows, be a little bit ahead of their cues when putting them down. And then this goes for nighttime and for daytime, the extending the sleep, Kelly, that you talk about. A lot of people like have short naps or the baby wakes up every 2 to 3 hours at night and they eat, but they eat a little snack and then they go back to sleep. And then we see that cycle that we referenced back about the snacks and the cat naps. So try and soothe your baby back to sleep. This is a great thing to start to do is think of it instead of picking them up and rocking them to sleep, which by the way, that's totally fine to do sometimes. It's totally okay. But if you kind of go through the checklist, my baby's not hungry, they went down at a good hour, try and soothe them back to sleep. So if they take a pacifier, give them the pacifier, rub their forehead with like some pressure on their forehead and rub between the bridge of their nose and their eyes. They calm by that. You can put a heavy hand on their chest and lightly jiggle. If they're on, you know, you can't put your baby down on their tummy, but if your baby is older and has moved to the tummy throughout the night, rub their back and pat their buns in their ear very loudly. Give them all the feels. And that's always the goal as a parent. Give them all the feels. You're there with them, but you're going to help them get there, not do it all for them. And that's just like when they learn to walk. You don't walk with their hands every time. You start to give them a chance to go on their own a little bit. So you're there helping them along and encouraging, but you try to give them the opportunity to do it themselves. So in the overall sense, the sleep environment that we talked about, extending naps and daytime or nighttime sleep, try and soothe before initially feeding or picking up. You'll be surprised what your baby's capable of when you set them up for success. And then over time, Kelly, you said it with Tashin that you're doing now, you know, he's sleeping most of the night. He's getting between 3 and 4 a.m. So you're going to do the passy a little bit, but you always know as a point, like they're hungry, you know, feed them, just feed them, give them that full meal and put them back down. Eventually you can push that 3 to 3:30 to 4 to 4:30 to 5, but you're going to go with his natural momentum and his natural rhythm of that. And so you look at it as if your baby is getting older and wakes up at the same time every single night, try and soothe for 20 minutes and see if they will soothe. If they don't, or they settle and then get back up, or settle, get back up, then you can feed them. But you are breaking that habit of the second they get up, you're either feeding or rocking back to sleep. Again, if they're hungry, you always feed them. If they're in pain, you always attend to them, no matter what. But for both nighttime and nap time, offering soothing versus a food or meal can kind of program your baby to connect those sleep cycles on their own and get that REM sleep that we were talking about.
Yeah, and I remember that being so interesting when we first started with Sebastian and we got him on the hour of the week he was alive, which is so crazy. Yeah. But looking back, but it was something where you would tell me, like, just put the passy in and see if you can get it 15 minutes. Like, just wait 15 minutes for me. And I used to be like, this felt like the longest 15 minutes ever. Chris and I would be one eye open, pushing the passy in, doing the back rub or the tummy rub, this tummy shake, and then taking a step out of the room. And when he was out of our room, but he was in our room at that point, waiting, and then seeing if it would work. And then it would be amazing, because then the next night he'd wake up those 15 minutes later, or he'd push through a half hour later. And you're like, wait, what just happened? And it's the reminder of, it would be so much easier for me. I remember Tashin being stuck at 1 a.m. for I think until 8 or 9 weeks. He was just like, 1 a.m. is awesome. I'm waking up at 1 a.m. And I was so tired at 1 a.m. that I'm just like, I just feed him and put him back to sleep. So I'm going to put the passy in for 15 minutes and see if I can get him a little extra time. I think that's kind of the thing I have to keep reminding myself is do the work now. He'll sleep through the night, and then you don't have to keep waking up at 1 a.m. And then, so it's funny because it's almost like weight loss or anything you do. We sort of plateaued at the 1 a.m. for a few weeks. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. And then all of a sudden now we're at 3, and I'm sure I'll plateau here around that 3 or 4 o'clock hour. And then I'll be like, I can't keep doing this.
Absolutely. Because it becomes a habit. We all have our sleep, back to kind of just to, have a set wake time and a set bedtime. We develop sleep pressure throughout the day, right? Our brains basically need a release, which is why babies nap so often. Their sleep pressure builds. They have to take a nap. Their sleep pressure builds. And then at night, their sleep pressure and their drive to sleep is the highest, and they need to go down. So when, I guess back to the point of when you're up at 1, it's so much easier to just be like, I do the quick fix, right? Do the quick fix. But when you push through it, you break that habit for them in a very gentle way. And then you make a new habit, and then you're going to break that habit. So just like getting through the final feed, and I say this all the time, or nap training, I'm like, you guys, it's the last 5 pounds. You've lost 20 pounds. This is the last 5 pounds. It's the worst. It's the hardest, but you will get there, and you will be so happy when you put the work in for that. But it's the hardest part. You plateau is a perfect way to say it. But it means your baby's moving in the right direction. That's just realistically how long it kind of takes to get rid of those final feeds or connect those nap sleep cycles. It just takes a little bit more effort and time. It's why I have a job, right? To be the person's biggest cheerleader to get them to do it. But what you said, it's so worth it in the long run. And when you put in the work now, and it probably goes with all parenting, right? Putting in the work now, makes such a difference in the long run, because that's the norm for your family. That's the norm for the baby, for all things, and that consistency, they know what to expect. When they know what to expect, they feel secure. What breeds confidence in kids? Security, so it kind of all plays on itself. And I mean, another bonus too is with Kelly, I know you're around family down here, but anytime people that watch your kids and care for your kids are implementing the same sort of routine, imagine how much safety and security that makes your baby feel, because they know what to expect. And that is something they love and thrive with routine.
And also, it's so much easier to leave your children with someone when my kids get up and wake up. They wake up and go to sleep at the same time. And here's their schedule. And here's a little piece of paper that goes through keeping them also keeps them the happiest when they're being watched by other people, and they're able to regulate their emotions better. Mm-hmm. And a couple of things that I've just learned over time with you is, we've had a problem with Sebastian being a really early riser. It's been something we've had to push through multiple times in every transition, from moving to the beach house during COVID, in a new environment, some of his major milestones at 18 months, and then, at 20 months, He's like, hey, let's party at 4:30. Let's party at 5:30. Chris and I are one eye open again, being like, buddy. But I would love for you to talk through the tips, which I thought were ridiculous. No offense. When you first gave them to me, when Bash was 18 months old, about our, pre-bedtime, dinner time routine and why we did that.
Okay, that's a good one. So I will say, and I mean, everyone, obviously, Kelly, that knows you or follows you, like Bash is extremely verbal for his age. I mean, that kid it's so, I could watch him eat all day long. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, look at him. He's talking and he's looking at you. He's just so beyond darling, but he's also extremely verbal. That doesn't mean people that the kids not as verbal are behind. He's just exceptionally verbal. So it's good for people to know that, because no matter what we do, we always are comparing our kids, right? But that he's exceptionally verbal. Kids that are really verbal or kids that are extremely observant, you see this with young babies that are very observant, they have a much shorter wake window as like a 4-month-old, because they are taking in double the time and they need a shorter wake window to process it. You see when babies or toddlers are extremely verbal or extremely inquisitive at such a young age, you have to think his poor little brain cannot shut off. So I think what I told you, Kelly, I'm like, it's just like you would have like someone with anxiety that was talking to you and they wake up at 4:00 and then they can't go back to sleep because they're like, oh my gosh, and then I have to order this and I didn't sign my kid up for soccer. And oh my gosh, I have to make that doctor's appointment. And your brain starts spinning and it's so hard to go back to sleep. I'll just go with Bash because that's
it was Bash. It is Bash.
He's like, oh my gosh, I can sing happy birthday. Oh, I can do this. Do you know what was that dog's name? Okay, I want to go surfing. Where's my dad? Mom, are you there? Daddy, do you want to make that? Like that's how he works. You can see it in his personality. So he was just an early riser. So with that age, you want to do a little some of the tips I gave you were so blah, but they work as you need.
They worked, and I was like, "This is crazy. How is this working?"
So we incentivized him. We tired him out to set him up for success, and then we incentivized him because Bash was at an age where we could somewhat incentivize him. So one of the things was you guys, if your baby is like that, like Bash was, do a ton of memorization with him. Allow him to learn more sign language, Spanish, English, whatever it is. When he is in his high chair, talk to him the entire time, work him out, ask him a million questions, respond to him. He is like a sponge and he was taking everything in. You want to work his brain out. Sleep is, he was at one nap, but you have to remember before 18 months, morning sleep is brain sleep. It is an extension of nighttime sleep. Afternoon sleep is physical sleep. Just like a baby who's extremely physical, they tend to have better afternoon naps because they've worn themselves out. Bash's brain, he needs the exercise. He needs the brain exercise. So I suggested to Kelly to do all these little things to get him moving. You will be amazed at what he can learn. And then also teaching him the boundary of like, hey, buddy, we love you, but this isn't the time to get up, because getting up at 4:30, if you like it or not, is not going to be helpful for your whole day. You're going to want to nap again at 7, And so we incentivized him with surf videos, right? He got to watch surf videos on YouTube.
Yeah. So what we did is we got the placemats with all the, like, we had cars, and I'm going to actually, hold on. I have a baby crying. One sec. Okay.
Come see Melissa. Hi,
Melissa. Look at him.
Hold on one sec. We're on that 7:10 schedule you have for us.
I was going to say, yeah, he's time to eat. It's 10:09.
It's 9. I'm going to just feed him while we talk, if that's cool.
Yeah, of course. Oh, look at him.
We'll cut this out. We'll leave it. He's a chunker. Hey, mom's boobs out. We're going to keep talking.
I mean, but he's on the 7. This is a perfect example. He's on the 7:10 and it's 10:09 and he's like clockwork, like right.
Oh yes, I'm here, Bubs. Okay. So let's go back to Bash. I might just leave this in. It's so real life. Let's go back to Bash. So what was cool is, you told me we needed to wear Bash's brain out. And we did that with placemats and flashcards.
Yes.
Okay. And we did that at dinner time. So we had these cool placemats at dinner time, and we had the flashcards that we used in the afternoon after his nap. And we wore out his brain, and then it was crazy. Like the next day after we did that, he slept like a half hour later than he had. It was literally a 4:30 a.m. wake up call at the beach. And then he got to like 5 or 5:15, and Chris was like, "Do whatever Melissa says." And I'm like, "Okay, babe." And then we incentivized his wake up and we got the green light alarm. And and I didn't think at 18 months that he'd be smart enough to wait till the green light, but we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, that he would be able to watch surf videos on YouTube with daddy in the morning with his Bashachino, which is his like almond milk in his corksicle mug. And we have like, or our Yetis or whatever. And we'd have our coffee and he did it. He waited and it's been like the greatest thing ever. He's like, Bashi, wait till the green light turns on. Bashi watch surf videos. Bashi watches Blippi. So we switch off between those two and it works.
It's so good. But that's the perfect, what you just said, Kelly, is that like, you're like, you don't think that they're old enough to kind of understand it sometimes. I think sometimes they're in this perfectly adorable little spot where they're like kind of a baby, but they're kind of a toddler, but they're not. But just like his brain is learning and the placemat things and, learning the capitals that we talked about, like it's insane what they can memorize. He can understand those sort of rituals of waiting for the green light because they're consistent and you're implementing them, and he can recognize, oh, okay, I do this and then this happens. And so it's kind of, I think we underestimate because when they're so little, like we underestimate how much they can actually process and take in, and they do respond to it, especially with everything with babies or toddlers. The more consistent you are, the more consistent they'll be.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I remember we went to the hospital to deliver Toshin, and my sister Chrissy was watching Bash, and she didn't have our like green light alarm because we weren't at our house, but she had her hatch. And so she's like, I used the green light with the hatch and I just flicked it on and he fully waited. We talked about it. And so he was doing it, he's doing it for my sisters, which is, I don't want him waking up at 5 a.m. when my sister's watching him, you feel horrible.
Yeah.
Everyone's sleep deprived. So
I love that your sister did that. Like, Aunt rock star, like just
she's on it. She follows you. She's on her schedule with Cashel. So it's important. It's just so important. And I always go back to those sleep studies. Sorry.
No, real life
in the background. I always go back to the studies around how important it is for their brain development. Like that's the most important thing for me, is that these boys have that REM cycle, their REM cycle. They're able to link their sleep together. And even, whether it's night or nap. So can we talk about the difference between night and nap? Because I think at night we just go like, oh, I'll just pop a passy and I'll leave the room. And we do that. We do pop the passy. And then sometimes it feels like we're playing the passy popping game. At what point do you kind of like let that go? Or do you give them a chance to put themselves back to sleep without it? And how long do you let them whine or cry or protest?
Okay. So for nighttime, really usually at nighttime, if they are waking up throughout the night and they are not going back to sleep, if it's not pain related, it is hunger at some point, right? They just need to eat and put them down. So I would say try the passy game at nighttime, anywhere from 15 to 35 minutes, depending how the baby responds. Because sometimes they go back into a sleep and then they kind of wake up, or they take it and they kind of, they're I don't want to say they're like back to sleep, but they're not upset or screaming. So in that event, I would try to let them be, because the baby that goes in and out, sometimes they're just getting back into a sleep cycle. So give them that opportunity to do it. If you pick them up right away, or let's say for you specifically, Kelly, he's going to smell you and be like, oh yeah, no, I do want the milkshake. Give me the milkshake. So try and soothe first. But after a certain amount of time, if he's hungry, he's not going to go back to sleep, or she feed him and put him back down. For nap times, it's a little different. So babies don't really consistently connect the sleep cycles for naps because it's also a brain thing, until 4 to 6 months. You're going to have days that are like textbook, where your baby sleeps 2 hours up until the next feed every single time. You're going to have days your baby struggles going down. You're going to have days your baby wakes up at the 45-minute mark, right on time, every nap for a week and a half. And that's usually based around a leap week, a wonder week, whatever you want to call it. So for naps, my best advice is have different expectations. Go through the checklist. Are they in a good sleep environment? Are they hungry? Are they in pain? Did I put them down before they were overtired? Those things will interrupt naps. Sometimes babies have to poop. When they're laying down and sleeping, their bowels relax. And so that sometimes things start to get moving and it wakes them up, and that's normal. So in the event that you cannot put them, so for naps, I would try again, 5 to 20 minutes to get them back to sleep. If they're, starting to nod off and close their eyes, I would work a little harder trying to get them back to sleep, because you're seeing the signs that they want to go back. They just don't know how to get there. If they're hysterical, which sometimes they get because they woke up in between a sleep cycle, they cried and fussed, you helped them, everyone got overstimulated, they weren't going to go back. So that's a time I say, extend them in the arms, wear them in the ergo carrier, take them on a walk, do whatever you need to do, because at some point, you're not going to just fight the nap for an hour and a half. They just need to sleep. And so give them sleep however you need to. Over time, if you do that though, every single time, that's going to be their preference. So I would say kind of switch it off. If they, try a nap to extend it. And if not, if you need to hold them, great. Maybe the next nap, you hold them the entire nap. And I am all for, especially little babies, all for holding them for naps. Enjoy that time. I would do anything to hold a baby for a nap again right now. Like I'm going to toss in and just let him rest. I mean, that you guys, it's the best, like do it. But start as you want to move forward. If you can hold your baby every nap for every day, most people can't. That's pretty unrealistic, especially someone like you, Kelly, who has a toddler. Like you can't do that. Or if you work, or if it's not sustainable. So a couple times a day, of course, if they have a hard time and you want to get outside, put them in the stroller and see if they'll sleep another half hour before their next feed in the stroller. That's okay to do. But don't also just say, oh, my baby only naps 45 minutes. You eventually want to continue to try to connect the sleep cycles, because when their brain is ready to and they're able to connect the sleep cycles, life changes. And it's so awesome when your babies are on those set nap schedules and they're getting the rest they need. They're getting it for their brain, but they're also so happy. And you have, for all the working moms, which is a lot of the people you and I, Kelly, both work with, like, it is so nice to know that eventually you're going to have, we booked this podcast during his nap. You knew he'd sleep. You know what I mean? To get on those routine is so helpful, trying to work from home, trying to do other stuff. So I encourage all those people to put the work in, but have the expectation it's going to take longer. Sleep drive and sleep pressure is completely different during the day than at night. So it takes longer, but once they start to get it, it is worth the work you put in.
Absolutely. I think that Chris and I joke right now that if both of the boys are sleeping at the same time, it's a solar eclipse. We're like, the solar eclipse, what's happening? And especially if they both give us 2 hours, we're like, I don't even know. We're not even parents. We don't even have kids. 2 hours to ourselves. It's better than night.
It's the best. And during the day, that it's and it's a break for everyone, right? Like you guys can connect. You can watch a show. One of you can work out. You can switch out. There's so many things to do when both babies, and every family we work with, Cal, that's what we try to do. We try to put all the babies on the same schedule, because it makes such a difference for the parents having that rest time during the day for everyone, and it gives you recharge. Like I legitimately remember the joy when all 4 of my kids would nap at the same time. Like I would get giddy. I would be like, oh my gosh. But no joke, I would actually come close to 3-4 o'clock. I'd start to miss them. Yeah. But then that time in the afternoon, I was so much more pumped up to do stuff and be ready and hang out, because we all kind of had our break. It was great. It's
you get your self-care on, whatever that is, clearing your inbox, working out, taking a breather, and then coming back together more excited to parent and more kind of with a better fuse. I think that's the hard part with lack of sleep, is as a parent, you have a shorter fuse. And, Chris and I talk about this because when Bash does wake up early, it's hard for us to be as patient as we normally are. And then you feel like a bad parent, and then you're in that cycle, and nobody wants that, So I will say for us, Bash is on that 6:30 to 6:30, and Toshin's on 7 to 7 right now, just because we're giving him a half hour difference. But at first, when newborns, you read wherever you want. You're the person who tells me to always put my kids down at 6:30 or 7 or 7:30 latest. But sometimes you'll read on the internet, newborns go to bed between 8 and 9 p.m. And we were doing that the first couple of weeks, and it wasn't good. He needed to go to bed earlier, and then he was sleeping better. And I think, anyways, it was just really nice, because then Chris and I did have that time together after both the boys were sleeping, even in those first few weeks.
Yeah. So. That is, I get asked that question a lot, because I know that's and I think sometimes some of the stuff online or information, which I do it too, if I'm answering questions in DMs or on my stories or whatever, answering questions or writing a blog post, there is a general sense you give out there, right? These are generalized wake windows. This is, so I think sometimes that said is that okay if your newborn's going to bed late? Yes, for sure. That's, to kind of give expectations to parents like that's okay. And a lot of times that's because their days and nights aren't, they're still in day and night confusion, so that just, it makes it easier and they tend to sleep better. But I have found with all the babies I work with, you can move that up and they really respond well. And again, that's not a recommendation. If I'm one-on-one, you're having that support to be able to be like, okay, this works for your baby. Like, who cares what Google says? Like, your baby is getting into deep sleep and doing great here. And honestly, one of the biggest when I work with a newborn that maybe we start, let's say somewhere between 8 and 14 weeks, I have to move that bedtime up the very first thing I do, because that baby has a witching hour between 7 and 10:30. And that's when I realized this is not working for this baby. So we adjust it, but that's a very common thing I see. So I guess back to what we've said, if that worked for Tashin to go down, by all means do it, because that was his natural rhythm.
Right. But then pushing him, we did, he just kept sleeping. He didn't, we were like, oh, we'll just put him down at 8 and he'll sleep till 1. And then we put him down at 6:30, or we put him down at 7 and he slept till 1. And I was like, oh, well, we'll just stick with this. I feel like I could talk to you all day, and your tips are just, I feel like, priceless for new moms, especially when everyone gets to sleep and these babies stay so happy. But I feel like I need to be cognizant of your time, and I want everyone to be able to follow along online with you and all of that. So why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and about your offerings? Because I know you have like one-on-ones and your courses, which I'm so proud of you for launching.
Thank you. Not me. I credit you for that push.
Well, you're doing all the work and you're talking to all these people in Zoom classes and doing all, you might as well record it and make it available to people who can't be there at 9 a.m. on a Monday or whenever you do it.
It was a great push. So yeah, so you can find me at Sleep Shop Consulting, and that's my Instagram. And there's always a ton of tips on there. There's always, different options to get free guides to download or different things. So I would say there's a lot on there. My website, sleepshopoc.com, has blogs. It has all of our different packages. It has kind of a background on Sleep Shop. It has links to my podcast, which is on there that, there's a lot of information on the podcast and a lot of information on my guides and that and whatnot. And, if people are really interested in the one-on-one, I'm happy to get on a call with someone, and I love to hear what is going on with their baby. What are they looking for? And then I can kind of go over like, this is the best option, or this is what I'd recommend. With that, we have 30-minute consults you can buy right on the website. We have different smaller packages you can buy right on my website at sleepshopoc.com. And then I also have a new course that you can purchase on my website or on Instagram, which is a 2-month all access course. So for 2 months, they get access to my sleep training video, my guides, all my resources. So kind of like everything you kind of need to know. And then plus a weekly Zoom call that they can jump in on and ask their own questions. Or if they can't make it, or if they don't want to ask their questions, they can just listen, or they can go back and over the 2-month watch any of the recorded Zooms. And honestly, so many people have so much success for that. They jump in and sometimes they're like, hey, we connect, let's work one-on-one. And that's awesome. And other times they're like, wow, I got the results I wanted in 2 months. And I think that's great too. So the courses are there, but literally we have every different price point available. So it's kind of whatever people are wanting to invest in and what they're looking for, we probably have something for them.
I love it. Thank you so much, Melissa. You are a rock star. And I would say, like, if someone needs, I'm sure they can get a lot out of your group courses, but if they need that one-on-one, it can be as simple as telling your kid to use flashcards, or knowing that Sebastian was taking so much in at such a young age. I remember one other thing that you did for us. Oh, Tosh is not going to let us talk about it. Yes, you will. Right? Okay. But the last thing that was so impressive was, remember, it being like a 45-minute to an hour wake window for Bash. And then you were like, no, he needs to be down at 45 minutes. And it changed everything for our naps throughout the day. It was just like, I always thought they need to be awake and stimulated to then sleep. But no.
It's the opposite. And again, that's a perfect example, Kelly, with Bash, with how observant he is, his personality. He needed a shorter wake window. He just takes in a lot, so.
Totally.
But I thank you so much for always your support, but for having me. It's so fun and it makes me miss you. And let's go get wine. And I want to hold that baby.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It's amazing. totally perfect that I had to feed him, burp him, and I'm now going to need to go change him on this podcast. So
I want to come over and burp him and hold him and see you and give you a big hug. So
okay, we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Right. Love you, Bliss. Thank you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.